So again, we are very lucky to have Inspire Care 360 with us today, and I'll let them get going on all of their good stuff in just a minute. I just want to explain that we also have a great giveaway sponsored by Discount School Supply, and it is for a $250 gift card. So all of you beautiful people who are here with us today are automatically going to be eligible as long as you fill out the survey at the end of this webinar. So once the webinar concludes, our survey will pop up. You'll fill that out, and we will get all of that good information over to the folks at Inspire Care 360, and they will go ahead and get in contact with you for your prize. So with all of that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to the director of the National Childcare Association, Cindy Lanehoff, to do introductions.
Hi, everyone. I hope it is a blessed afternoon. And I assume since you were able to join the webinar that it must be. We appreciate you spending some time with us, and I hope that you find our topics meaningful to the work that you're doing, the essential work. I'm really glad to be able to bring Tony D'Agostino back to one of our webinars. He is the founder and CEO of Inspire Care 360, and he spent over 10 years as an early learning and childcare owner of up to 6 centers in Western New York. Tony's been a friend and a partner to NCCA for the last 3 years, and he shares the commitment and passion for helping owners be able to improve their services and make their jobs easier. And we appreciate that he shares this with our audience. Prior to the early learning space, Tony actually led practices in human resources with close to 20 years of experience with training and curriculum development. And ultimately, he is very well qualified from being a provider, being the CEO of Inspire Care 360, and having worked in human resources. Very well qualified to present this topic to you from having walked in your footsteps, or still walking in them, because I know Tony is still an owner. I don't want to drone on, because I want to give Tony and the other guests that he has with him time to put this presentation or bring it to you and give you time to ask questions. So Tony, it's all yours.
Well, thank you, Cindy. You're amazingly kind. And for the rest of your team too, I want to thank you very much. I also, NCCA as well as NCCA have just been doing amazing things. I couldn't be more proud to be associated with these organizations for what they do for advocacy. If you know, obviously you are part of their network if you're on here today, but the one thing I do want to say is advocacy for all of us is really critical at both the federal and the state level. I'm a big proponent of it. I have schools. Most of you participate to some degree with schools. And the way that we move forward to really get to our different why, my why is to really see the next generation of kids just be absolutely amazing. And sometimes we have to do many things to juggle it to make that happen. Part of what I see my role is with IC360 beyond my schools is to try to bring different kind of solutions to simplify it for owners and operators, to make it easier, just so you don't have to juggle so many things. Let us be part of that if it makes sense for you to outsource some elements that you're like, hey, I specialize in the kids and the staff and the families. All those other things that I could leverage. How do I use a center of excellence? And that's hopefully what we are. So today, what we're going to talk about is managing the performance conundrum. Cindy was on here just a few minutes before we all got started. And she said, you know, Tony, I really think this is one of those areas where childcare owners really need to try to do their best to get a handle on. And she knows that because of her hands-on experience. I know of my hands-on experience. One of the reasons that I put this forward and really wanted to build something around here is because it's not easy. plain and simple, performance management isn't easy, but if you think about how important it is, imagine that you come into a job, whether you're a business owner today, or whether you're a director, or whether you're a teacher. And when you come in, you don't really know what your expectations are with any new job role or role you take on. If you don't understand what the expectations of you are, it's hard to feel success. Imagine going home every day and not knowing if you're doing anything to be successful for yourself or for the company you work for. It's really a challenge. It messes with your head a bit. If you have a clear understanding of the roadmap of getting to success, of what I need to do to get there, it is so much easier to not only achieve that for yourself, but it is so fulfilling for you to become and develop a competency in what you're investing your time in. Does it help your school? Absolutely. It helps them get someone who is qualified. It helps that person develop. So even though you may be an owner, operator, administrator who's attending this to learn more about what nuggets you can take away, put yourself in the same shoes as how important is setting up expectations and managing through to those expectations. It's pretty important. But I think the thing we're also going to find out is it's really tough. It's time-wise, it's tough. So we're talking about something here that you can start to do on a manual basis. But at the end of this, we're also going to talk more about what Inspire Care 360 has done to automate a process if you're interested in pursuing. So with that said, I'm going to move forward. We're going through a relatively quick agenda. We're going to talk about the performance management conundrum. We're going to talk to manual as what you can do yourself to make it happen, as to sort of the automated way in what we've rolled out, and a little bit more about IC 360. So again, thank you all very much for joining. Cindy did a wonderful introduction, gave me more credit than I even knew that I possibly had. So she was way more generous, but my background has been really with childcare. I'm actually going into my 12th year of owner operator of up to 6 schools. Right now I have 3 of them. And so far too, is my background has been all around talent. It's all been around the people world. So it's not just HR, it's been around recruiting, how to, I owned a job board. We had a company that we did all adult learning and development. We've talked about doing change management, outplacement, all those different elements. So I've worked in those things in a previous life, and I'm hopefully bringing that to our community here that I've been involved with for a good while now. Also, later in this presentation, I have the honor to have one of our members who actually has been part of the beta testing of what we have done for the performance management solution that we'll talk about a little bit later. This is a wonderful lady, a real true executive and individual who I think it says owner on here. I think she would say is, wait a minute, I don't have to pay the big bills. But she is, I believe, the executive director of Carolot, and she has done a magnificent job. If you want to talk about a program that has grown steadily and very impressively, Michelle is that lady. She is highly talented, and we're so glad to have her on here to make some comments a little later. So let's talk about performance and really getting to performance. If you've seen me do a presentation before, I've used this analogy once or twice before, and that is, if you were to hand an oar to everybody on your team, your childcare team, and put them in a boat, in a river, and you hand them all an oar, first time they're in the boat, first time with that oar, and said, okay, go as fast as you can to get to the other side of the river. What do you think would likely happen? Likely the boat's going to start going in circles, if even that, because you got one person who they've done a lot of rowing before, they're really starting to crank away. Another person who's sort of going backwards. Another person who's blaming someone else for not doing enough, but not actually doing the work themselves. Another person who's actually just sort of getting by, sort of like this guy back here. He's sort of getting by not doing anything. And so you have all different people with different tenures and different experiences that get put into a boat to all have to perform to the similar objectives to move that boat forward. What does that sound like? It sounds like our schools, right? We have people for 16 years with us, some who've been here for 6 months, some who have been for 6 weeks. And in turn, we need to get them all to a similar performance level, to also respect one another, but that they're all singing off of the same hymn page, as they say. And that is that they're all in unison working together. So instead of this, how do we get to this? How do we get to where everybody's working in the same cadence, understands how to perform, understands what their expectation is, what they should be doing, and instead of a leader like down here just yelling and managing and telling people what to do, they coach instead, like the coxswain of a crew boat. They're telling you, they're coaching you, and they're helping you get to the next level. As a role as an owner operator, how do you get yourself to be that coach instead of just daily people showing up to your door and, okay, I want you to go clean up here. I want you to make sure that that's washed down. I want to make sure every day doing the same thing. No, get your team so they all know what they need to do in a timely manner. You may have done some of this. Here's an opportunity to look at how you can manage through it. So let's talk about the issues with performance management. Learning and applying knowledge at your school to develop key professional attributes. We believe that there's really 6 key attributes that there are within the childcare world that are really important to get the competency of an individual to the right level as a professional, and also to develop their character for you. These areas are, what are your core values? So when we say our core values, those are your core values that are for your school. Like, for instance, part of it is you might be a learning institute. Part of it is you might want to be authentic. Another one is you might want to be part of the community. Maybe it's having fun. What are your core values? Those are the base foundations of what you would have for a culture. Conduct. What is the code of conduct that all of your teammates must abide by? Something you probably have in your handbook, or if you don't, you should. But what should all of your teammates abide by? How should they act when they're at work? How should they act when they're on social media? How should they act when it affects your school? Do they know? Is it ingrained? Is it all at the exact same level with all your teammates? So when I go through core values, conduct, put in your mind, do all my teammates know the exact same thing at the same level? Compliance. What are the state requirement compliances that they must meet to not only keep themselves active for their continuing education, but to meet your state regulators and licensors so they can meet their requirements, so they know how not to get into hot water. Yeah, if you have a class full of kids and we have a licensor visiting, now is not the time to go walking out of your classroom to go get new art supplies. Okay, you shouldn't be doing that anyhow and leaving the kids unattended. But I don't know how many times they've even had at my school where one person just walks right past the licensor and goes and uses the restroom. Like, you don't do this normally. Why did you decide to do this today? Well, that's oftentimes because some of our staff members, they're not all on the same page, and they sometimes do not understand how it affects. So do they understand the compliancy levels? Then your curriculum. There's really 2 elements about curriculum. One is the curriculum that you offer your children. Your teachers teach your children. Are all of your teachers, or all of your assistant teachers, your staff, are they all familiar with the curriculum, whether it be your themes, your activities, the curriculum, station, play, Montessori, whatever? Do they have a full understanding at the same level? 2 is, what do they need to do to learn and be a professional in their industry? So do they know what's important for them to grow? Career opportunity is something we're going to talk more about here, but did they understand that there might be more opportunity than just an assistant teacher, a teacher, or assistant director? Maybe you can get up into a regional or executive director, but that still is a pretty flat organization. Do they recognize that there is more opportunities possibly at your school? And you might say, well, we currently don't have much more beyond that. But the thing is, you can create that. And then culture. Really, the foundation is the culture is taking your value. It's taking these 6 C's, the conduct, the compliance, the curriculum, the career, you putting that all together. That is really what builds your culture. And your culture should not be dictated or mandated by one owner or operator. Your culture really is a blend of what's important to you as the owner operator, what's important to your staff, but what's also important to your families, and to a small degree, your community. That what is your culture really defines the environment that everybody participates in. And not only how successful you will be, but also possibly how much fun people will have enjoying work. They spend way more time at work than they do with their families, with their friends. They're at work with you much more. Isn't it amazing if they're just really feeling belonging and they feel like they're part of something that's moving the needle? That's really the elements of truly looking at what setting expectations are. You're setting expectations against these 6 key areas. We call those the 6 C's. So as we talked before, when you look at performance, everybody has different levels of tenure. Whether you started your own school, whether you came into an existing school, rose up, and now you're leading that organization or own it, whether you bought a school, you oftentimes have different team members who have different levels of experience. How does that affect things? Well, you look at the traditional ways of how we looked at performance management. And when you look at the traditional ways of performance management, typically is we bring in these different team members. Then what we do is we set an expectation for them. Hopefully a very clear expectation. I know from experience, as much as I've put some of this in place in the past, quite oftentimes no expectations are set because we were under a ratio and we had to try to get someone in the room quicker than we wanted to. Okay, so that is not my fault. I take full responsibility for it, but that was like, we have to do something about this because we cannot keep on doing the same thing and expect different results. So traditionally, you would, and corporations do this outside of just our childcare world, they would set expectations. And then what they do is they wait 6 months to a year and they hope that someone is going to be doing better. And then they do a measurement after 6 months and said, well, you did okay here, but you really have to improve here. You're really not good here. You've done a great job here, what have you. And then you do the hope strategy again. And then 12 months later, you do another review. That's even if you get in the reviews. I know when I call and say, okay, this is several years back when we used to do something like this, I would say is, okay, where are we with our performance reviews? Like, well, we're down 3 staff members. Our assistant director is full-time in the toddler crash room, and our cook called out sick this week. So our director actually has to cook. So what is our priority? Is there a possibility for us to really do this kind of work, to get this done? And then it keeps on getting pushed. So the thought is, how do you take this and automate this more? So when we look at the basics of this, we look at, why do people want to belong at an organization? How do you get to those 6 C's? When you look at it at first, there really is the element about why people tend to come to work typically today. They come to work for a paycheck. They're coming to work because they need a job. They are coming to a job because they need the physiological needs like you have in the bottom here, but they're also looking that, I have employment, I need disposable income, I'd like to do things, as I have to take care of my health, I would like to have a place that I can rent, maybe eventually own. But those are not the staff members that stay with you. The staff members that actually stay with you are engaged. And what does that mean? Engage means, if you look at this Maslow's hierarchy of needs that we learned back in college, or if you haven't heard of it before, it is a well thought out theory that Maslow had that basically said is, how do you engage people to where an individual is having their expectations met, as well as what is just important to them. So that's what Maslow's hierarchy of needs are. You get to this engaged stage of loving and belonging. This is where, why do people stay at schools? Why do staff members come and some stay and some go? The ones who feel like they belong to something are the ones who are typically going to stay. What that means is, why do people join clubs? Why do they join fraternities? Why do they join gangs? It's because they have a sense of belonging of like-minded people. Well, what's that like-minded part? That goes back to your values. The values that you share are like-minded. That's a place that you can grab onto. Also, a place that gives you respect, where you can build your self-esteem, you can develop status, recognition, and rewards. This is a place that really values you. Does that organization value you? Does your schools value your staff by demonstrating this level of connection and belonging, as well as offer that respect, those rewards, those recognitions, other than the attaboy or the employee of the month? Okay. If you get to self-actualization, you pretty much don't need much from anybody else. You know who you are, what you need, and you're on your own roadmap. So your culture really develops when you get to this esteem, loving, and belonging area. Why are we digging so deep here? Is because we can just talk about here's a new way to do something, but we want to give you the psychological background as to how people think and how they really process information. So some of you may have seen something like this before, but when you look at it, how do different staff members come on? Well, they go through competency through learning and experiences. What does that mean? That means that as an individual joins your organization over time, okay, over time here, they will naturally develop. They develop competency over time. How do they do this? They get hired. They might have onboarding, handbooks, orientations. Maybe they have the foundational compliance training or their basic training or operational training, hopefully, that you have for them. If you don't, those are areas that they sort of have to get organically over time. Then maybe there's some opportunity for mentoring. And we have to remember the difference. A lot of times we talk about mentoring, but what it is we have assigned someone who tells a new person all the things they need to do. That's not really mentoring. That is either consulting or telling. What we want is a mentor to be able to have an individual go through experiences and then they get provided feedback. So that person is empowered, but then they become accountable for what they've learned. As time continues, this area we call the investment zone. This is where you're investing in a new staff member. Now, this time frame can be very long if you do not have organization around how you onboard people, you get them up to speed, you get them quickly to operational and to mentoring. This could be up to a year here alone, okay? But once you sort of can get that level of competency development, then you start to get a return on the investment of your teammate. And it's not just a return because they become competent. It's also a return because they also become more confident. They are not just competent, but they're confident in their job role, which makes it easier for them to come to work every day. If you come into a job and you do not know what to do or how to do it, it's easy to get bullied. It's easy for someone to take advantage of you. It's easy for someone to be condescending to you. It's easy for all that to happen. So the quicker you get to competency, the easier it is for you to look at everybody else in your organization as peers, and that you're not that rookie. You are someone who's at peer level. That is significant. And we'll talk about that in a second based on the timelines that you stay there, what it does to retention of your staff members. So at this point, you can infuse further professional development for your teammates. This also allows for additional career paths. So it's possible new assignments. So this is really your new hire ROI model. And this is determined by you. Does this happen more organically over a year? Or can you really look at how do you get this focus, bring this down to almost a month, which will increase your ability to recruit better staff, have better retention, and higher level of competency, and people who have more confidence. So this is really sort of a critical element of how you manage your teammates to performance. So if we look at this, what is it about performance when it comes to tenure? Organically, this was a source from Visor that looked at in the childcare space. And what they showed was employees typically across the entire market with 1 year or less experience had a 45% turnover rate. When you go from 1 to 3 years worth of experience, so year 2, all right, and going to year 3, but year 2, it drops down over half for the ability possibly for that person to turn over. Okay, so it almost cuts in half by the time they get to year 2. In year 3, it cuts in half again. So that means by the time we get to year 3, the chance of that person turning over is relatively low from where you originally were. But when you think about this is about tenure, and we can look at it as just chronological. In other words, we can just simply say is, well, this is just how it is, it's chronological. But if we go back to what we learned on the other slide here, this is up to the school. The quicker you get people up to speed, the quicker you build their confidence, the quicker you build their competency and their character, the quicker you really fundamentally get them here. There's no reason you can't bring your teammates up to the equivalency of year 3 by the end of year 1, which would dramatically reduce your turnover, which would dramatically increase that retention, the competency, and the confidence of your teammates. So this is what peak performance or performance management is all about. So when you look at also performance, one of the elements that we have as a conundrum too is we're always making a bet, as I put it, when we hire someone. Teammates come to you now, and depending on what state you are on or in, it can be very heavy. Some people, the living wages, as they call them, or minimum wages, have started out in some states being relatively low. And I would say some of them are still very low, which is not great. Some states have been very progressive. My schools are in New York State. We are at $14.20 minimum. Right across the border in Pennsylvania, I think it's $7.25. It's half for the minimum wage. Is either state right or wrong? I can't answer that, but I will tell you this. My expenses are significantly higher in New York, and that means my parents have to pay significantly more in New York. But the challenge is quite often now we're getting staff members who come with very limited experience, but they're demanding much more. I have staff members who are interviewing, or potential staff members who are interviewing and say, I deserve $18 an hour. Why? Well, because I can get $18 an hour at Arby's. Okay, well, not exactly sure I want you caring for children because all you want is a wage. I really want to understand what value you're going to offer to those children and what value will you offer to your teammates, the families, and eventually to our school. How does that come about? Well, quite often we make a bet up front. So we basically say, I'm willing to pay you this, and then I'm going to hope that you are successful. But if you think about it, if you can truly align performance management to actually how an individual performs, it then becomes a much more balanced engagement with teammates. So instead, if you hire somebody on, and we typically would do is, after 6 months, you do a performance review, maybe we add you a quarter. After a year, maybe we do another increase. After a year, this is how we traditionally have done it. It is giving rewards based on tenure, not on performance. Yes, in some situations, someone's done an outstanding job, we're going to promote them and we're going to give them more. But the challenge is your whole team is not empowered like that. Typically, your whole team is beholden to your administrators, yourself as an owner operator. It could be beholden to whoever's in charge of their salaries or whatever to say is, do they deserve to have extra rewards, whether it be for pay or other kind of benefits. In this kind of scenario, if you could truly align performance, the objective is that as they perform, they can increase themselves. So they know that the more that they're performing, the better they've become accustomed with those 6 C's to get themselves to being competent, to develop their character. And it is proven they can do that, they're able to get rewards. That is a nice match, because then you know that their wages can increase by what they're actually delivering back to your school. That rewards them for them investing in themselves and in you. And that's what we're talking about today. So team members choose the speed of rewards and value that they can offer the school. That is really flipping this on the head and making teammates become accountable, but empowered to make decisions instead of just being told what to do, how to do it, whether they hit the mark or not, whether they have expectations or not, and then maybe I'll give them a raise based on the time that they're here. Two totally different models. This is really flipping on its head to say is, hey, if you invest in yourself, you invest in developing your competency, you get on the same page as everybody else, you are going to get rewarded for that. So who's it for? This really works out for all of your teachers. It works out for your administrators. It also works out for anybody else you may possibly have in your school. So it really works for every possible staff member you have. And when you think about motivation, what has been our leadership style? I'm not going to pose this just on you folks. This has also been an evolution for myself. But if you look at it, quite often we've started what I call with the stick. The stick is where you're telling others as your management style what to do. Quite often, our administrators come out of the ranks of being a teacher. Our teachers come out of the ranks for passion for children, from learning, education, whether they went to school for it or not. But quite often in teachers and education and any kind of ECE programs, there's very little bit about developing management and leadership skills. Those things often don't come with those kind of educational programs. So by hook or crook, they slowly learn it over time, sort of like how an individual learns about the 6 C's over time. So quite often we naturally go to the stick side of it, telling others what to do. Punishing for not accomplishing tasks. Well, I don't know. You didn't clean up the room. The table still needs to be wiped down. You can't go home until that gets done. Well, that's a punishment, right? But they didn't do what they were supposed to do, which they were supposed to do too. But this is sort of creating difficult conversations ongoing between your administrative team and your teammates, or your ownership and administration. It is really sort of always getting to that difficult side. You risk losing staff in a world today where everybody seems to be highly sensitive, that you can just say one word wrong and I'm gone. Well, wait a minute, your class is in there right now. Yeah, well, I'm leaving, best of luck. We've had that happen. We know other schools have had that happen. We have to look at when people are so sensitive to it, why is that? Well, a lot of it is there's been a cultural shift where people are very worried about the perception of who they are and how you handle them. But we do truly need to look at, can you get to more of what we call a carrot environment? This is incentivizing your team, incentivizing them for doing a great job, empowering them, allowing them to volunteer to participate. You still can hold them completely accountable for what they should be doing. But this is an opportunity to build your team and for them to have fun, to look at the gamification elements of this. This really adds tremendously to retention and belonging. Okay, so when you look at some elements, there are elements of what can be voluntary that someone does themselves, but you also possibly need compulsory. Where have I heard compulsory before? Well, you'll hear the Olympics and you hear the gymnastics. They have the compulsory floor events or the compulsory high beam events, whatever. Those are all that we all have to get those things done. And in our industry, there are compulsory elements, right? We have to make sure that the CEUs are in place, that any kind of foundational training is done, that people understand their code of conduct, that people have read through their handbook, they've done their orientations, all those different elements. they understand how the business operates. Those are things that still lend themselves that they must get accomplished. So you can't move everything to volunteer or to carrot, but there are some things that are going to be required in our business that they do need to be managed, that people must participate in, though we know that it's low motivation. And sometimes it can feel like it's punitive or feel like a burden. As long as you have clear communication as to why you're having to do that to get everybody on the baseline, then people can absorb that a lot more. When you look at the carrot again, or that volunteer side, staff can choose what kind of rewards they want. They can choose how to control their career. They have the ability to align themselves directly to what your school is doing, and they can certainly feel rewarded. So this is the big difference between compulsory and volunteer. But we do have to recognize there is a place for some of this. So unfortunately, you can't get 100% away from the stick, but you can move more towards the carrot. Now, people go through learning and development. It's one of the areas that if you think about it, there's the old phrase about, it used to be the cobbler's children. I mentioned that to my son the other day, and he's like, is that some kind of a pie? I'm like, no, it's a cobbler's not a kind of, yes, it is a kind of pie, I guess, but that's not what we're talking about. This is a shoemaker, okay? And the fact is, the old phrase was the cobbler's kids, meant that, all the shoes in the community were done by the shoemaker or the cobbler, but the cobbler's kids, the shoemaker's kids, never had good shoes because they just didn't have the time for it. Well, that's oftentimes at our schools. We bring in these teachers to teach all these children for years, to make them amazing kids, to not only teach them, but to care for them, to provide safety to them. But what do we do for our teachers to develop? These are people who got into the world of learning and development. And oftentimes, very little professional development comes their way. And if it does, it's oftentimes in compliance training, which they're taking the same shaken baby course every single year. They've heard it before. They probably get it. But how are they developing? How are they getting to the next level? And all training is not the same. So what that means is, quite oftentimes you get training that's either a talking head where someone is just speaking one way to you, or there's a lot of reading to be done, or there's very little interactives. Those type of things where you're reading or you're getting a lecture or video, people have about a 10% level of retention or less if it's just reading in a workbook. So if you have a workbook about your orientation, you can expect people to remember about 5% of that. If you have a video of what to do, one-way conversation, or someone's just speaking one way on a podium, sort of like what I'm doing today. So the retention is not fantastic right now. Hopefully we can get this more engaging. But it does get to about a 10%. When you start having more interaction where people can do interactivities or they can do question and answer, whether it be a training that is live or in an e-course, it doesn't really matter. But that interactivity for them to think and process, that is something that truly helps them get to a higher level. 25% still seems low, but it's actually much better than most. Then on top of it, what you look at is if you can build into that training and that learning where there's scenarios where people have to role play or they have to make choices. Do I go behind door number 1 or do I choose door number 2? And then once I go there, I have other choices to make. So if a parent comes to me and makes a complaint about an issue, what should I do? Should I go talk to the teacher right now, or should I go talk to my, owner about it first before I make a move? That's scenario-based learning. And then you get to really application level of learning. Application level of learning really is about how do I actually take what I just learned and actually apply it on the job? So quite often we have new hires come in and the first thing to do, they're assigned a mentor and the mentor tells them everything they should do, but they haven't learned anything. So they right now are not really going to retain what a mentor is telling them what to do. They haven't learned it first and then have the ability to apply it on the job. But once you can have people apply it on the job, they get to that 75 to 80% level of retention. If you really want to get to the highest levels, that's where they start to train others. And that's important in the direction that we're going. So what are programs and courses associated with this. So what we look at is to go through a program like this. This is something that, yes, you can manually create and do yourselves. Yes, we're going to talk about how IC360 has a solution here at the end, but I want to let you all walk away with the idea that you don't need to, you don't have to invest in what we do, but you can do something yourselves. You can align what all your core values are, and then you can create levels of achievement. We're calling these mastery levels. So mastery level 1 through 5. And then in each one of these levels, you really are looking at that pyramid of retention. So what that means is people first need to know about what the elements are of these 6 different core C's. Second, they need to understand what is the value of them. Now that they know what the solution is, what is the value of them and how does it actually move the needle? How does it change things for the school, for themselves, for the children, for other staff members, for families? What does it do to change it? Then they need to look at, can they demonstrate it? Can they role play it? Can they work with others to really show that they're starting to understand how it actually works? Then can they actually apply it on the job and really do it? And eventually, can they teach others? If you can get all of your teammates to get to the level where they all could teach others, we start looking at that first slide. I know some of you who have come on since probably didn't see it, but that's really where you get to that crew boat, where everybody knows what they're doing, they know the cadence, and the administrator owner is coaching them. The administrative owner is not just telling people what to do. So when you look at how you can set this up, we talked about the compulsory as to the voluntary. But when you look at creating and assigning and possibly offering some level of rewards, we call this sort of the basics or the table stakes. Everybody should come in and know and understand these 6 elements of the core values of your school, what code of conduct means, the compliance requirements, the curriculum for the kids, as well as the curriculum for themselves, the career opportunities they have, as well as the culture they're looking to develop. These are those compulsory elements, a little more stick, a little more, we've got to get these things done and get those accomplished, okay? What this does is these are typically not voluntary, and the company typically pays for that person's time to do this work because it's an investment. You're making that direct investment in that individual and you're telling them you need to do it. So most Department of Labors are not favorable on you doing things that are required by the business and then not paying your staff member for it. It's not a good PR move yourself alone, but it's also illegal in most states and federally too. But the objective is to understand that you are making an investment in your staff. So these compulsory elements often deals with what is in your handbook, how are you going through the orientations, your operational procedures, your foundational and your compliance training. Then you start looking at, well, okay, we've gone through that now. How do we get to that mastery level 3? Maybe left to 4, maybe over to 5. And when you think about that, we think about that carrot stick thing again, right? Carrot chasing after them. Imagine chasing after for all of this training and development and practice, all these things, these demonstrations. Man, that would be almost impossible for an administrator to chase after if something wasn't automated. But you could manually put this in place at your own schools. You could create those assignments. We believe you get to these next levels and you make them voluntary, which that does a few things. One is if you say it's voluntary, that means you're not mandating it. You're saying you can do it if you want. You don't have to participate and do that. But if you do it, there are rewards that you get for accomplishing it. This also means that since it's voluntary, you can choose whether or not to pay for that person's time in doing it, because there is a bit of a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Maybe not gold, but for instance, what I do with my schools is you can have an increase in wages. You get to level 3 and you've completed level 3 where you're demonstrating across there, well, that's a great time to have a wage increase, possibly an additional PTO day, possibly an opportunity to make them promotable within their ranks, of whether being a teacher or administrator, or any other kind of rewards you choose to put in place. So that's the carrot that you've put in front of them to say is, you can volunteer for this, but here you can give your own increase. You've demonstrated, you've had this looked at, and people understand that you actually are truly completing this. So that means in a manual process, you have to do it much more with observation, from administration. If it's automated, a system can manage this for you. Level 4, in level 4, it's about applying knowledge. You can then offer additional wages. Like, wow, this is a lot to give increase in wages. Well, we'll get to level 5 and we'll talk about it. But we're also talking about, what are we receiving as the school out of this? What is the teammate receiving? Here, you can add additional rewards, like additional PTO days. Maybe they're now promotable into management or higher levels of management. They can maybe participate in leadership meetings now that you have, or ambassador programs, any kind of programs that you would like to set up. Then you look at possibly what's at level 5. And remember, this is about getting everybody to be able to teach across these core elements. So we're really talking about, how do we get people here to actually do these instead of trying to stick all the way there? How do you get them there with a carrot? You can then create additional rewards that these people may receive, with additional rewards across the board. This could be additional things with passion project volunteer, additional wages. And you'll be like, well, wait a minute, Tony, you put up there at least $4 an hour extra. I guess the question I have for you is, let's just take on average through the US, that if you're hiring someone at $12 an hour, okay? If you're hiring them at $12 an hour and they really haven't developed at all, they have that long continuum, they've gone through the slow growth over a year, they're okay. They're really not at the level where they understand all these elements. They don't really feel competent. They're really not feeling confident in themselves, okay? Should they be paid much more? Well, maybe a small increase. But if you have your teammates who've all invested to get here quicker, sooner, faster, you then have them paying almost $4 more. So that brings them to $16 an hour. Is that $16 an hour person worth it when they are now at this level? If you're asking me, I'm saying, heck yeah. Every day of the week, I want a person who's that level of competent. I'm willing to pay that because they're meeting our performance standards. So what is the difference in, we talk about a solution called, to get this implemented, gamification. So what do you mean by gamification? This is a good example. Without gamification, this is where you have individually assigned training. You probably have to pay them during the business day, or $1.50, or 1.5 times, I should say, after hours for time and a half. Okay, if they're going above their 40 hours a week. Significant management to ensure that staff have the time to train. So you have to spend the time for scheduling, how much training after hours, what training is completed by when, chasing the staff around, and where's the fun, right? But if you do it with gamification, which basically means you make it more competitive. And I'll give you an example of how that happened with my schools when we did an alpha test here. With our schools, what we did is our staff full access to all the training. They had voluntary opportunity to participate as they saw fit, like we just talked about. Since they were volunteering for it with rewards on the end, they did not need to be paid for the training time, even if they use this as a criteria for promotion. It was fun, competitive. We had leaderboards. It wasn't like only one person could win. They all could win, but they get to see the time frame. And that training is portable, because you can also say to them that you accomplish these. With our program, we actually do rewards and badging that we'll talk about a bit. So it's fun and prideful, full of achievement. Remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Getting to recognition, getting to the rewards, that self-achievement, you really are focusing on getting to that area, and it truly builds culture. So when you look at the opportunity to gamify how people work together, it creates a natural inbred competition that we all have, but it's also where some people are quiet or shy and don't love to be in sort of a game. This also is for them in the sense that there's no loser. It's not like someone could win first and then no one else can win. Everybody can win when it comes to how you roll this out. So I'm going to introduce to you what we've done with what's called peak performance. Peak performance is a solution that we've layered on top of Inspire Care 360's content distribution platform, which is called Inspire University, if you were a member with ours. And in Inspire University, we'll talk about it in a few slides later, but comes not only content distribution for you to be able to have all of your training, but also your content, your forms, ability for them to practice on the job. All of that is managed under one environment, easily assignable, easily trackable, takes a huge burden off the shoulders of administrators and owner operators. So the system does it. It basically counts, butts in seats. It is counting how people are achieving and working towards the goals and objectives you've assigned. So you basically are setting out expectations, having them do different things, and this manages that all for you. So I want to bring on a special guest. Hopefully she's still with us. Michelle, are you out there? Can you come on your video and your audio?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm good. How are you today, Tony?
Good. I got to see her a few minutes before our meeting, and I always love having a chance to see Michelle before that. And yes, it still says owner, so I'm giving you ownership over Caroline, over Dave.
Thank you.
But what is your official title?
My official title is Executive Director.
Executive Director, and she's one of the best in the business. I don't know, my Jen Price is pretty good too, though. I like her. So, but Michelle has done an outstanding job with developing the organization. But Michelle has come to us, and as part of being a member of ours, they've also looked at participating with peak performance at the inset of us doing a beta test.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to ask you a little bit of sort of the before after, Michelle. This is definitely not scripted, so she can go way off script and like totally submerge me right now. But she, when you looked at something before you did this, how did you guys organize performance as to now as to what you're doing?
Well, I think we kind of do the basics of what every, I would say, center is doing right now. Doing a lot of classroom observations, taking time away from, the directors or program coordinators, having them spend time in the classroom, even some instances having myself come out, spending time. We obviously did evaluations on staff, any way that we possibly can to be able to kind of gauge the performance of our staff that we have with us.
Right. Okay. And then we started getting you involved with this newfangled thing called peak performance. And tell us a little bit about what your experience was.
I was very excited to be a part of this beta testing, simply because anytime that you can alleviate some stress from your directors who already work very hard, and then be able to not only invest in your staff, but work on something to maintain and then retain them. I was just excited about that opportunity to do so. So we were definitely on board to be participants. And I had a lot of staff who were very interested in it as well. As Tony said earlier, we are a growing company. And so positions are becoming more and more available. And we are always looking to grow our staff from within. So having this peak performance and having the opportunity for staff to just kind of go online and do what I would like to call some succession planning and growth within their career gave us the opportunity to kind of see who is ready and willing to grow within this field and not just come on to this position just for a paycheck.
And it's very interesting you mentioned that, because I thought even with us we did our own alpha testing with our own schools and did beta testing with a few other schools outside of it, which was you. And you came to a very similar thing like I did, Michelle. And that was, we had some people who didn't want to participate.
Mhm.
And I found it very interesting, but it was also very telling that they were really not long for our school. They really didn't see them. It also made things very clear where we thought, oh, wow, they're all on board. No. They're like, well, no, I'm leaving in about 6 months. We're like, oh, well, good to know now, you know?
Right, yeah.
So did you run into some of that yourself?
I did run into that. And like I said, it's a great opportunity to kind of weed out those staff members who want to make a career of this. And for those who are just kind of using it as a stepping stone to get either to that next paycheck or that next level in, you know, in their own career or their own plans. So we were quickly able to kind of go through and weed out those staff. And now we're taking the opportunity to do what I say, which is invest in our staff. Because we all know that age old saying, you know, happy staff make happy children who make happy parents, who in that light kind of keep your business afloat.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think we saw some interesting different silver linings come out of all the testing we did for well over a year. And so, you know, some of the feedback you guys provided also helped us modify and, you know, codify the offering itself. So, you know, that feedback was critical. And that's something else that we've been doing overall. So if, you know, looking away from just peak performance, don't worry about that as much, even though we're rolling that out as a offering. But what do you think are probably your best lessons learned when it comes to engaging staff overall?
I think the most important thing I take away from this is staff have to want to do it for themselves. It can't necessarily be a supervisor or a mentor pushing it for them, but this gives you an opportunity to see who really is looking to invest in their own career and not just have someone behind them pushing them, because, you know, we all have those people that we think would be a great, you know, whatever it is in our position, but they have to be able to have and want that for themselves. So we were able to take that away from it for those who want that investment in themselves.
Yeah. And, you know, I think what Michelle and I are both saying to the audience here is, even though a person may not want to volunteer and participate at a high level with this, that's okay. We just need to understand their place so we can set better expectations for them, but so they can support us and we can support them. So, Michelle, thank you so much for jumping in for this just brief moment here. You guys have done some amazing stuff and really have helped this program become even that much better. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me today.
No problem. And we're going to continue on here. So with that said, managing performance, if you were to do this in a manual way, you need to first define your objectives for your teachers and your administrators. You need to define your professional development that you want them to grow and then create that professional development. You need to define on-the-job practices. You need to create a cadence to manage all the staff, from a rollout to a tracking to a reward. And then where is the fun in the culture, as they say? What, you know, is this easy to do? No, you're actually putting significantly more burden on your administration than they probably are even likely doing today. However, we've rolled out peak performance. Peak performance is really taking and automating this entire process. So what is the objective of peak performance? This is really about automating and systematizing learning experience to accelerate that professional development, competency, and also helping better recruit and retain team members. It helps them develop that character and gives individuals that roadmap of exactly what they need to do by when. It helps incentivize staff and administrators to compete and to complete objectives voluntarily. So certifying teachers and administrators as a proof of competency. So this is an opportunity to not only say, hey, you've gone through and you've become competent, you've also have great character, but we're actually giving them certification that we've certified them. Inspire Care 360 certified that you have actually checked a big box. You've gone through this and completed a number of things. So when you look at that, it significantly reduces your administrative time and effort. It also provides families proof of investment. So your families know that you have a dedicated program for growing all of your team members. This can be a significant marketing opportunity to help develop and evaluate. And then schools will align, reward actual performance, and this will foster staff recognition, belonging, self-esteem, all those things we talked about in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Teacher path and administrative path, significant enhancement for school and individual branding. I know we've been going on here for a good amount of time, so give me about 5 more minutes possibly, or are we at our end?
Think that we could do 5 more minutes, and because this is great information, anyone who is able to stay on with us, please do. If not, we appreciate your time and we'll send the recording after. So I'll go ahead and give you your time, Tony.
Thank you so much. So peak performance is not a significant additional effort for any administrators. It actually takes down your time. Need any kind of technical background? Nope. It's all simplistic in nature of implementing and running. It's not a manual process. It is not cumbersome or confusing to those who don't participate. It's as just clicking a few buttons in our environment, and it basically helps you put an email in, it assigns people, and off to the races. It's not a big implementation undertaking, and you do not have, this is double negative, have no guidance and support. You have full support and guidance, and it's all part of our membership. But what you have is programs from levels 1 through 5. You have a bunch of different courses that all come with the programs, all these different courses that meet all these different expectations, as well as what we call our practicals, which they do on the job performance on, where they're taking and doing it on the job, where they're really getting to that 80% level, and they get an opportunity to be observed. So individuals have these courses delivered to them. They take them, the system identifies when they started, where they are, when they completed a course, when they've earned a badge. So Peak Performance is a credentialed program that certifies staff members from the different mastery levels, like we just talked about. All right. And how does it work? Well, we do have something called Inspire University. As a person is set up in Inspire University, they would start to work towards their mastery levels. As they do it, IC 360 alerts administration when they've achieved the different badges they have. That individual that is rewarded a badge, it goes into their badge backpack, and then it is put into, they can use that for social media. So the staff member can say, hey, put on LinkedIn, I am a level 1 certified early learning teacher mastery level. Okay, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can then have this as part of what we offer as a leaderboard. So people will see, as everybody continues, they'll be able to see how they've progressed. How have they been able to move forward overall, and where do they stay up to speed with their other teammates? Again, we had one of our teachers in one of our schools put up a whiteboard and just put people's names on it. They finished all of the work well before the other 2 schools that I had do it, because they were not worried about chasing after them. The individual teachers go, wait a minute, I want to complete that. I want to show that I'm done. And so they completed things right away. That was simplification of gamification. So Peak Performance really is taking where people may lack expectations, lack training, lack cohesiveness, and lack culture, so they're not engaged, to where a lot of us are. They have basic training, some expectations, basic mentoring, becoming engaged, and then they really get to, after they've implemented Peak Performance, uniform achievement. They act like they're a team all together. They're aligned for their values. They're professionally trained and developed. That is really what Peak Performance is. So we've completed what we've talked about Peak Performance. I'm just wrapping up just a little bit of knowledge about Inspire Care 360. For those of you who don't know, we offer a healthcare solution. I'm not going to go through it now, but if you want to learn about it, absolutely amazing, super low cost program for everybody. And we did just launch an ebook. You can find that if Sarah's out there, you can put a notice or we'll send it after to you. But we have an ebook now on peak performance. So that takes this and brings it to the next level. If you want to download it, it's free to download. It's something that we've created and I wrote, and Sarah helped out a lot, who's my marketing individual. But this helps you really get to the depth of those 6 C's and really understand what is important, how to create them and how to implement them. And just overall, for those of you who want to know, what does Inspire Care 360 really do? We focus in 3 buckets. One is staff engagement. We provide onboarding training, professional growth, performance management. This is like peak performance. We do leadership development. We also have healthcare and HR support. We also help with enrollment for growth by helping you do a brand assessment. If you need some development of websites or Google ads or social media or SEC or SEM, as well as reputation management, protection, star ratings, we offer all that. And then operationally, we help you with financial guidance. And then we've put together, second to none, probably the best group, the GPO that is out there, where you can get up to 50% off on food and supplies, depending. Average is about 20 to 22%. We've seen it as high as 50, but honestly, we have a program that really is second to none in the nation. So that's who we are, and that is about peak performance. So we are at the conclusion. If you want to learn more, you have some information here. We may have put some in the chat. I'm not sure because I haven't had a chance to look at the chat, Moira.
Yeah, no problems. I think Sarah's pretty much handled mostly everything in the chat. I know she just recently answered a question and put all of the links to both the new ebook and to peak performance. So thank you so much, Tony, for your time today and for all of your expertise, and to our very attentive audience who is definitely gunning for more information. So please, everyone, make sure that you grab those links from the chat, but I'll also include them in the follow-up email along with your certificates for being here today and the recording. And then again, just to wrap it all up, the giveaway for Discount School Supply, that is a huge giveaway for $250. Please fill out the survey afterwards. We have some great questions in there to get some more information about our presenter, and they will take it from there. So I'll hand it off to Cindy to do some last comments. Or Tony, if you have anything to say, go ahead, Tony.
One quick thing is, there's possibly some questions that came across that I couldn't answer. If I could get any of the questions forward to me, I'd be more than happy to answer and get them back to the group.
Absolutely. Thank you. We'll do so.
Well, Tony, I just want to say this was an excellent presentation. No surprise, having worked with you before. I love the visuals, and I hope we can get everybody a copy of this, because I think they will go back and look at a lot of the things that you recommended. And again, having been a practitioner in this field for many years and utilizing performance management because it was required in the company I work for, everything you put in and then some is going to work if people let it. I compliment Michelle for letting us know how it worked for her. And I also actually lived by what she said for many, many years. And that was happy staff, happy children, happy parents. And that's what we're all looking for as they, pay us a significant amount of their salary, to care and educate their children. So with that being said, thanks to all of the essential individuals that are out there doing their best work for children. And I hope you really utilize this information to take your program to the level I know you want it to be at.
Awesome.
Thank you all so much. We'll see you in the next one.
Thank you.